Sorry.
All right, it is our third episode of the Watchback. The first one was on the very first Double or Nothing show in 2019. The second one was on the very first WWE Evolution show. And now we're doing one on Wrestle Kingdom 11, which featured Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada in 2017. And that is going to sort of be our look back because they're having their fifth match next weekend on Saturday at All In. Joining me are the guys who talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling every week on this very channel. Steve and Conway, what is up?
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this one again.
Yeah, we all were kind of just excitedly watching the show going like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Jeremy Finestone is here with me as well. Jeremy, what's up?
Not much, hanging out, talking about Kenny Omega yet again. Here we are.
Yet again, Kenny Omega, who I just got to talk to the other day, which was kind of cool. I did not ask him any questions about Wrestle Kingdom 11, though. Like, I kind of was leering that way, but I knew Dave was going to jump the question, so it was more of a setup so that Dave could get it out of the way and we could talk about other stuff. But yeah, it was cool. He's still the same, very honest, very thoughtful Kenny Omega, though. Him talking about dealing with the diverticulitis was crazy. It doesn't sound like he's going to be able to necessarily just be 100% ever again.
Really? Yeah. I mean, when you look at this, and I didn't know much about diverticulitis until all of a sudden it affected two of the more prominent wrestlers of this generation, like, Brock and Kenny and all that. And you just kind of it doesn't take much of a deep dive. It just takes a real shallow dive to see that that's awful. I'm like, whatever you think it is probably worse. And the fact that they're able to deal with that and that Kenny is able to operate again at a pretty high level is remarkable enough. To hear that he's not going to be 100% is sad to hear, but that's an awful disease.
And I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. He did not say that necessarily, but he did talk about how much he has to rest these days and sometimes how early he has to go to bed and those kind of things. And it just makes you think like, this is the job, right? Giving up their bodies for the business of entertainment. And we'll talk about this as we get to the main event of this show or this Wrestle Kingdom show, but you're talking about a match that kind of sets the tone for what pro wrestling is today, or at least what the guys strive for and the women strive for pro wrestling to be when you talk about an in-ring product. Like, you can look back and go, oh, like there's lineage here from this match to what Tony Khan wants his main event level matches to be. So I think that's one of the major takeaways that I got, but we'll get there eventually. Let's kick off with some research here. So I dug in through a whole year's worth of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. I went through every issue, so 50 some odd issues, and I went specifically to all of the New Japan segments so that I had as much of a full story as we could get. And I started at the previous Wrestle Kingdom the day after, because as you all remember, who leaves New Japan Pro Wrestling the day after Wrestle Kingdom? None other than AJ Styles, none other than Shinsuke Nakamura, as well as the Good Brothers, but they don't really mean as much to that main event singles scene. They don't mean anything at all, by the way. But two big guys who I'm sure New Japan had plans with. And what it reminded me of, Jeremy and Steven, since you guys cover the day-to-day current New Japan, is how insane it is that everyone's on like a 1-year contract and could just leave after the biggest show of the year. Like, what the hell?
We go through it every single year with New Japan, where anybody that does a big loss or has a big loss at Wrestle Kingdom, we're like, does this mean they're leaving? Is that it? Was that what they exit? And a lot of it is because we found all this out. I'm sure Dave probably knew, but maybe as fans, we found out that most of the roster's contracts expire at the end of January, like right after Kingdom. So yeah, and to see AJ and Shinsuke, Gallows, Anderson, all those guys, and there was a story that Ghetto told on a podcast somewhere, where he found out about it in chunks kind of that day, at the day of Wrestle Kingdom, when he's reeling from the news that AJ is going to be in the Royal Rumble. And then, he hears the Shins leaving and all that. And apparently that had been in the wind. And then at one point, Anderson comes up to him and he says, Ghetto, I kind of need to talk to you. And he just listens. No, not you. And remember, Ghetto would put Anderson in the G1 finals one year. I mean, Anderson was one of Ghetto's guys. And so it's like, he just was a day for Ghetto to forget. That was a rough one for him. And we talk about how there's more people than just Ghetto in charge of booking New Japan, but he was the architect. And all of a sudden his foundation was taking some severe hits.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had a few years here where Okada and Ospreay left in a fit, and then this past year where all of a sudden it was the weather report: who's leaving, who's staying, who's coming, who's going, who's talking to Fightful, why are they talking to Fightful, are they sticking around? And it gotten to be so regular that you just kind of like, you see Wrestle Kingdom, like, all right, let's start seeing who's on the way out, or who's going to be chirping, if you will.
All right, so let's start there. And I just want to read you a one-liner description of the 2016 Kenny Omega through the eyes of Dave Meltzer. His one-sentence description of Omega: Kenny Omega is an incredible talent, but is sometimes prone to overacting.
You don't say. Is that true? I hadn't noticed. Kenny can be a little cartoonish sometimes, and he has a very expressive face, and sometimes he can turn that up to 15 when he needs to. I think this is a great example of how he made it work for him, though.
Yep.
Yeah, and the fact that emoting big helps you in a baseball stadium, and yes, you have the screens and you have cameras that help you with that. But his body language is emotive. In Korakuen Hall, it comes off a little bit like, dial that back a little touch right there.
Mm-hmm.
In a stadium with, in this case, I guess there were about 26,000 people. They said 40 over and over again. It was about 26,000 or so. Still plenty, still a big crowd. But in that environment, it added to things rather than subtracted or distracted.
And we'll talk about the effect of New Japan World, which was a very young network at this time. And they had many aspirations for the network, one of which was like, we want 100,000 subscribers. And I think they actually eventually got there, like a few years later with the Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega match. I seem to remember that number, if not, then very close. And it was not a giant success at this point in time. We're talking like, in the tens of thousands versus the hundreds of thousands. But Omega is actually very helpful from the perspective of getting the US viewers to purchase the sub. And you guys remember this. There was no English presentation to the service whatsoever, right? It was like it was all Japan. Like even the websites, like now you go to New Japan, you click the translate and you get some stuff there, but it was in an infancy. So Kenny Omega does help this aspect of the service. Okay, so Dave mentions when these guys leave New Japan. Dave writes, Okada against Naito, Makabe. I didn't imagine Makabe was going to be in this sentence, but at the time, and we're talking 2016, or Kenny Omega is not a Dome main event. They need to strap the rocket on Kota Ibushi when he returns, but coming off surgery for a herniated disc in his neck, it's hard to know if he can perform at the same level. And so Dave is actually incorrect, because they are able to not only get Naito over, but Naito gets a run with the championship during this time frame. Okada's first title defense is against Naito, I believe, which he loses. The first title defense post Wrestle Kingdom. And then Of course, Omega becomes the lead, the de facto leader of the Bullet Club and the leader of the Elite, and he is put in that position. So it's kind of interesting that Dave, when Dave looked at kind of the forecast for New Japan Pro Wrestling at the beginning of 2016, he was like, Koda's the guy, not anybody else. And as we see, Koda has a different pathway during this time frame, one in which I actually got to talk to him, and not very well because he doesn't speak. He didn't speak English to me, at least. But I saw him. I think during this time would have been WrestleMania in Dallas. I think he was doing an Evolve show, and he was rumored to be in the Cruiserweight Classic.
Right.
And we asked him about Vince McMahon, and he had no idea who Vince McMahon was, or at least did not know the name Vince McMahon, which was kind of funny.
Never heard of the man.
Okay, so
yeah, but Naito's journey is fascinating, isn't it? Because
yes.
he was already a star going into Wrestle Kingdom 10. The difference between Naito as a star between 10 and 11, a lot of things happened with Tetsuya Naito. You mentioned that he did win the IWGP title from Okada at New Beginning. He did so with interference from the debuting Sonata.
Sure.
Seiya Sonata debuted at that. And at that point, he was full on heel. And we see that in the other members of LIJ at Wrestle Kingdom 11. They are heels. This is not, and we'll talk about that when we get to those individual matches. But he's using interference to get in there. And then Okada won the thing back at Dominion. It was just a switch and all that. The other thing that happens with Naito, he ends up getting the Intercontinental title. We'll cover that when we get to the thing. But also, he picks up Hiromu Takahashi, who was not in the company until Power Struggle of that year. So we're talking like late fall.
He's like they debut him kind of like the old what was the old Survivor Series egg? Remember?
The time
gobbledygooker.
Yeah, the gobbledygooker. Yeah, poor Hector Guerrero, right? But that was the gobbledygooker. But it was a little bit like that. A time bomb would appear on the screen with a countdown, and we all knew the time bomb is going to explode. No one knew who the time bomb was until about a month before, and then everybody kind of knew who it was. It had come out, particularly when his run in Mexico came to an end for Kamaya Tachi. But you think, okay, well, it's going to be Hiromu coming home. And it happened with, and this is how far things have changed. He came back when Kushida won the junior heavyweight title back from Bushi. Bushi had a run with the junior heavyweight title. Bushi has spent like the last, 6 years eating pins. In 2016 was the junior heavyweight champion and lost it to Kushida, but the time bomb went off and Hiromu came out. This was Hiromu's first really big match at 11. So all those things coming together for Naito, a run with the world title, the Intercontinental title. A lot of 2016 for New Japan was building up both Omega and Naito. And then they all kind of exploded here at this Wrestle Kingdom 11 in the two key matches on the show.
Okay, so post Wrestle Kingdom, AJ Styles and Kenny Omega beat Nakamura and Yoshihashi in a tag match. I believe this would have been at Dash.
Yes.
When Omega pinned Nakamura with his one-winged angel finisher, which shocked the live crowd and immediately established Omega as the next contender for the Intercontinental title. Omega then attacked Styles, gave him a one-winged angel. The Young Bucks then both super kicked Styles, and Omega stated that Styles was fired from the Bullet Club. Omega then said he was tired of pretending to be a junior heavyweight and is going after Nakamura's title. Now, do you guys, I very much remember this. This is, Twitter, you all the clips and stuff. And we'll get to this when it gets to Wrestle Kingdom. But I watched Wrestle Kingdom 10, I think, because was that the Jim Ross, Jeff Jarrett production?
Ooh.
Because I think it was on pay-per-view.
I remember Matt Stryker doing it.
Okay, there's a pocket of time where they're trying to get New Japan Pro Wrestling on like US pay-per-view and stuff to make it easier for us to watch. And I remember there was like 2 in a row that me and John LaRocca, and one of them was Dave Dutra, came over and we just hung out and watched at Dave's house. And I remember we all went like right about, I would say, maybe a half an hour before the show's going to start. We're like, all right, coffee run, like what's open, and well, let's just be prepared. And Dave's like, get me one. And I'm like, dude, you don't drink coffee. He's like, yeah, I know. And I was like, okay. So we get him a coffee, and of course he doesn't touch it because he doesn't need it, or at least he didn't need it back then. He may need it now, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, sometimes, but
we're all a little older than we were
on the
then.
couch, but let's not go too far to that one.
Okay, so this happens on Dash, and I remember the attack on AJ because I didn't really know that much about Kenny Omega back then. Jeremy, do you remember this happening, this angle happening, and do you remember having thoughts about it?
I remember it happening, but I was a little bit in and out of wrestling at the time, so I had to revisit all of this, and I was not fresh with it at the time. So it was honestly just like fascinating to watch, like the 6 months of him just getting shotgunned into this position and just being elevated over Tanahashi and Nakamura so quickly. And then, like just put into the G1. And then, didn't love the Elgin stuff, but, Elgin was a guy to get him where he needed to go and was perfectly useful. But at the time, it was exciting, but I was like, I think my attention was on AJ coming to WWE.
Right. That was a very big deal for people who don't
Royal
remember.
Rumble. I remember being with my friend Patrick up in Oakland and watching it, like, oh, it actually happened, like the whole deal with him. And it wasn't until later that I was really catching in on that because I was more WWE centric at the time.
Yeah. What do you remember about this, Steven?
I do remember getting it. I watched this. I watched Wrestle Kingdom 10 on a thumb drive. That I remember that somebody managed to get it and get me a broadcast over within a week or so or something like that. So I was following along, and the stuff about AJ leaving and all that had hit the zeitgeist and things. So I was aware of that. And when they said that Kenny was the one that took over Bullet Club, I was a little surprised.
Yeah.
This is the guy that had just lost the junior heavyweight title. So they don't usually have juniors leading. Even then, it was weird to have a junior leading a faction. Fergal Devitt, Prince Devitt, would be the odd exception to that rule. And he kind of went heavyweight soon after.
Devitt was a bigger star than Kenny Omega was in the same scenario.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely was. So it seemed like a gamble. It seemed like a gamble to make him a leader of Bullet Club off that. But you certainly knew he was good. But the question is, just as a faction leader, that was a question. And a lot of 2016 was about establishing that he could be. But when it first happened, it did kind of make you turn your head a little bit. And I just think the guy that just lost to Kushida is the Bullet Club guy. And the Bullet Club, the leader of Bullet Club's always in it for the World Heavyweight title. And so he looks like he's going after the Intercontinental title. Okay, fair enough. But it seemed a little small at the time, both in stature and in star power. But he would prove us all wrong on that one.
So Nakamura is stripped of his Intercontinental Championship. And it was a New Japan decision, according to Dave, which I still kind of scratch my head about because of how we know WWE manipulates these scenarios constantly. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about this time frame is, if we're talking about the Wrestling Observer Awards, the newsletter awards, New Japan Pro Wrestlers take the top 4 spots in Wrestler of the Year, and the winner of the award was actually AJ Styles, which was kind of interesting. So New Japan from Japan historically, with Dave's audience, has always gotten great coverage, and people are you mentioned watching on a thumb drive, the tape trading days of yesteryear. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me that New Japan specifically dominates that award, but at the same time, they're at this crossroads of, from a business perspective, they're kind of you could even say struggling a little bit, but from an artistic and creative standpoint, like, they're the most beloved company for those people who are in it for that reason. So they're at this interesting crossroads. New Japan Pro Wrestling is. So owner Wait, where am I? Okay, sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit, but let me go back. At the last Nakamura show, he was doing his saying goodbye to New Japan last match. Omega comes out to interrupt him, but then Tanahashi comes out and basically becomes Kenny Omega's new challenger. The problem here is Tanahashi is working on a separated shoulder. And so when they set this angle up, they believe that Tanahashi is going to be ready to face Omega in this big match, to be the one to kind of crown Omega as the next guy. Of course, you have him beat Tanahashi, who is the former world champion and is still the biggest star in the company. But he's got this shoulder issue. And, you know, if you think about the time frame in which he went from the ace and the top star to his body catching up to him, like it kind of starts here where he's hurt here, though, as we'll talk about it at Wrestle Kingdom 11, he still has a fantastic match with Naito in the semi-main, and he would get the title back from Omega, but when Omega does eventually win it, but then, you know, we're on this downward trajectory with Tanahashi, and the shoulder injury is kind of the really apparent right here. So he beats Omega beats Tanahashi in Osaka, and he forms the Elite with the Bucks. So they're able to do the one match, but then Tanahashi can't have the follow-up because he's too messed up. And this is where Michael Elgin comes in, like Jeremy had said. But the creation or the offshoot of the Bullet Club, which is the Elite, which is Omega and the Bucks, this happens on the New Beginning show, which is the crowning of Kenny Omega as like Steven said, like a heavyweight wrestler here.
Yeah. So you know, that would be something that would come to dominate the New Japan, at least the top level of New Japan, for quite a while. You talked about Tanahashi there. It is interesting to see how at Wrestle Kingdom 10, he puts over Okada finally. Wrestle Kingdom 9 ended with Tanahashi beating Okada walking out literally in tears, crying because that's the mountain he couldn't climb. Then Tanahashi beats him. He's still, like you said, the biggest star in the company. When we get to Wrestle Kingdom 11, it does feel like there are two guys that are bigger stars than Tanahashi on that show in 11, and it happens over the course of this year. And when we get to all this, we're going to talk about how Naito's ascension, the buzz around Naito when he came out, and then Okada ascending to this almost regal level, from which he would look down upon the rest of New Japan for the next couple of years. Kind of started right here. Yeah, you're right. The shoulder injury and all. But 2016 was a bit of a downshift for him as far as just being the number one guy. And a lot of it was because his body was starting to turn on him. Yeah. So, and the other thing, I just very briefly, I promise I'll be quick about this. It's interesting. You mentioned that the New Japan guys taking up all the top spots. 2016 in WWE was still an interesting era, but we were right in the middle of McMahonism, you know, with some of the booking decisions and some of the weirdness that would go on with who was being pushed and who wasn't, and their refusal to push certain people that the fans want, almost not even passive, just flat out aggressive toward the fans. It's like, you're not getting what you want. It's what I want, and you don't have a choice. Wasn't going to be true forever, but it was in 2016. It reminded me a lot when a lot of fans were just dissatisfied. They were just looking for alternatives. And at the time, New Japan was the alternative. There wasn't an AEW. The Ring of Honor was around, but you know, New Japan kind of became that little underground thing. And it was because of YouTube, because of thumb drives and all this, it became a little bit about what New Japan and All Japan were like in the mid 90s. And I go all the way back to when I was trading tapes. Everyone in WWF had a second job. There was the wrestling plumber, the wrestling hockey player, the wrestling whatever, right? WCW was an unholy mess in 1994 and 95. We were seeing Kaiji Muto, Masachono, Shinya Hashimoto, Misawa, Kobashi, Kawada. It was just like this. This is what wrestling can be, and it almost cycled around to that in the 2010s when New Japan was catching fire. There wasn't a true alternative in the U.S., so us hardcores were looking around. We found, and a lot of us found New Japan that way. I never really left New Japan. I traded tapes and things, but all of a sudden I had other people who kind of knew what I was talking about after a couple of decades there where no one did. So I think it was a lot of dissatisfaction with WWE and the lack of an alternative that since AEW has provided.
Yeah, absolutely. And which we thought was actually going to be New Japan US.
They tried. They were going to try.
Which
they thought about it for a while.
They are setting up. So post Omega Okada, they're setting up the two Long Beach shows, which I remember going to, and like this was like kind of like a kickoff to like this trying to expand. And New Japan World is they want more American viewership, and so there's this thing after Wrestle Kingdom, which makes Kenny Omega a very interesting free agent at the end of after the Wrestle Kingdom we're going to talk about. Okay, so owner Kadani says they're going to offer Kazuchika Okada a 5-year contract from April 2016 to April 21. Unheard of historically, because they want to build around him and make sure he doesn't go to WWE. He also said the company has earmarked a $2 million marketing budget to make Okada a mainstream star. Kadani said they're going to have to offer longer contracts to top stars because they don't want to turn into WWE's minor league feeder system or AEW's minor league feeder system, as we have seen happen of late. So I just found that amazing because they're seeing WWE kind of preying on their talent, and the one guy that they've been investing and building in, they're like, no, like you cannot take this guy because we have put all of our eggs into this one basket. But it is fascinating, even in 2016, that they're like looking at, like, we've talked about the last when Okada signed with AEW. We had this debate over whether he'd be a bigger star in AEW or WWE. I was one of the few people who wanted to see the WWE version of Okada, but there was a caveat of if they were going to treat him as like a top guy. If they were going to treat him as kind of Nakamura-ish, I would have been out on it. But I was interested in their version of him. Now he's fat and happy in AEW right now, doing what he likes to do. But that is fascinating. Like from a 5-year contract, and we're talking about most of these guys are on 1-year deals. So this was all of their eggs in one basket. And Jeremy, does it give you just like thinking about how they currently still do business? You're like, you guys saw this in 2016. Obviously, the pandemic is a big part of this because they just don't have the same money. But did it give you any nightmares?
I mean, it's the contract, right? You had a rookie contract, and now you don't pay the rookie price for Okada. But they have a new guy, and they just did this with another guy a couple weeks ago, Aaron Wolf. They threw 5-year contract on him. They're building around this guy. He's debuting at the next Wrestle Kingdom. Everybody is all in on him. And we are in the precipice of what New Japan thinks is an all-new Okada. Like that's what they want out of this guy, is a level at the Okada to just usher in a greater age. And thinking about what Okada was able to do in 2016, doubling back to what you were saying about Tanahashi, and his role in that 2016 to 2019 era was no longer a number like a 1A, 1B. They had 4 guys now. It was the Naito, you had Okada, you had Tanahashi, and now you had Omega. And all of a sudden, this landscape just opens up wide, in which you have 4 guys with an equal amount of respect and reverence among the fans, and it made that entire era just feel so much bigger and more magical. Like it wasn't just one guy to build around or 2 guys. So that was something that I really liked. And like the 1-year contract thing, it's a detriment in a lot of ways, but budgeting and watching what New Japan is doing in 2025, like they don't have a whole lot of money. Everything just seems to be the budget option of what direction that they're going. And when I think about Kenny Omega and what they were able to do in 1 year with him in 2016, I don't think they've ever been able to replicate that with anybody ever since.
They've tried. They've definitely tried.
They haven't tried. They've come close with Jay White, Gabe Kidd, both seem to have tapped into some of that to some extent, but the flat out unmitigated success that Kenny Omega was for that year, they've tried, but they have not quite hit that hit the jackpot on that sense.
Yeah, they have the next Okada, by the way. He's partially in New Japan. His name's Konosuke Takeshita. That's the guy. Just in case you're wondering. As soon as they can get him away from AEW full-time, which is what Konosuke seems to want to do, that's the guy.
In exactly 30 minutes of this recording, we got Takeshita's name in here.
He's the guy.
Okay, so what is Kota Ibushi doing? I'm
What is Kota Ibushi doing in this?
That is always a question that you need to ask.
Yes, this is what we're talking about in 2016 and what we're talking about in 2025. In 2016, like, he's got to see that he's got some leverage here, that New Japan needs stars. He could have just piggybacked off of this Kenny Omega story, being that they have a history. Instead, he's trying to run his own promotion, which allows him to join the Cruiserweight Challenge that I just mentioned. I mean, one of the
classic
great kind of sliding doors moments of this year is what if Kota didn't care about that? Just like, I'm all into this New Japan thing. I want to be in this mix. And instead he's under a tiger mask, in the second match on the show, which is a little bit of a far fall for his talent, for sure, as we would see over the next coming couple years when he does actually get his run.
You know, something funny that I think about in hindsight, and I think the Cruiserweight Classic might have been a mistake for WWE, because it was a gateway for a lot of people to be introduced to a lot of wrestling that they could pivot away from WWE. You found out about TJP for the first time for a lot of people. Kota Ibushi, Zack Sabre Jr., a lot of these names that WWE thought they could just sign and bring on over, and, you know, they get...
Yeah, they wanted him for that 205 live show.
Yeah, they're gonna lure him in, and then these guys are like, "Nah,
we're good. We're
and
good."
Then they got a little bit of money. They got to be on a WWE like thing, scratch an itch if they ever had it, and then they just moved on with their life. And a couple of those guys never seen him in WWE since.
I saw somebody.
But now I'm watching.
I saw a tweet that said, I think they're uploading those matches on the NXT YouTube channel or something like that.
Oh, good. Yeah,
I just saw that.
Yeah. Well, Kota has always been a mysterious guy. He's always been a strange dude, and very few people have gotten in the way of their own success as successfully as Kota Ibushi has over the years. And of course, there's been injuries and there's been other issues with him. But even back then, he stayed freelance when he shouldn't have, probably. When signing with a company would have made them more comfortable to put more behind him. I think New Japan always held back because he was a freelancer, because you didn't know if they were going to get him. And that's another lesson that New Japan never seems to freaking learn, is that they put so much into people that they don't have signed under contracts. But there's not a lot of evidence that these people learn from their mistakes. And it basically is the theme of this segment, because we have New Japan on 1-year contracts and not really being able to be fair, like you said. The pandemic almost myrtleized New Japan. They were weeks away from not being able to continue as a company, as it turns out. We know that now. And it took Bushiroad a while to recover from that, and they still kind of are. But the key is, those 1-year contracts, Kota Ibushi getting in his own way, and people being poached and all that. We're a lot of these things we're still talking about in the same way today with this stuff. So, you would hope that somebody would learn, but it didn't necessarily happen. But Ibushi, yeah, he just wouldn't commit. He wouldn't commit to anyone, and therefore no one ever really committed to him. And I think it cost him a lot of very prominent spots on major shows and maybe runs with titles, because they're just, he could go and work for the guy across the street anytime now. We can't put all of our eggs in his basket, even though he had the talent, absolutely, to do so.
There's one, I think, advantage to the way that he did it, though, is there was always a whisper of, could Kota Ibushi be the person to do this thing? Like, he was always an option, which made him a little bit of a mysterious guy. There was always a little bit of a
Could he show up, kind of thing? Could he?
Yeah, and you know, so wrestling is just overexposed like crazy today. You know who's not overexposed is Kota Ibushi. Some of it is because of his injuries, but just over the years, he never stayed for too long, and I think that helps this aura that he still has. Now he's going to have to deliver in the ring to match that aura, because that was what it was when you see this guy, you're going to be amazed because he's fantastic. And, you know, he has this opportunity in AEW, but in the Kenny Omega interview that Dave and I just did, Kenny was saying how, you know, the reality of the situation for he and Kota is how do they save things? Like he was saying how, you know, do you have to do this this specific move to the floor, or can you actually take it out of your repertoire, or maybe save it for a big match or a big spot? But it's like this process for these guys is to just, you know, they know exactly what to do in this moment, what's going to work, what the crowd is ready for, what's going to, you know, get people fired up. And it's just part of who they are. And how do they kind of take those things out to save themselves as they get older? And I sensed from just talking to Kenny that was kind of a hard part about wrestling for them, is what do we take out? Because people expect us to do these. We want to be as good as we can, but does this thing need to happen in order for us to still have these great matches? So quite a conundrum. And I imagine what a lot of these wrestlers do, right? Like if you're Will Ospreay and you're like, oh man, this cage, I'm on top of this cage. I got to do something off of this cage, even though a few months before we just saw like Adam Copeland break his leg from being on top of the cage. You know, it's just like, do you have to do it? No. Do you want to do it? Yes. Can you control yourself? And many times, no, because this is what they expect out of themselves. So I found that discussion to be pretty interesting.
I find that fascinating because I watched the Gabe Kidd and Kenny Omega match to see if I could spot moves that he did with that match against Okada. And there are 100% the same spots that he did, including the springboard senton over the ropes into like the audience. Like, no, you're doing the exact same stuff.
That's the move where Dave yelped.
Yeah,
because I was I was in the interview. I was telling Kenny how we watched that match. Some of it was a little nervously because we wanted him to be healthy and not to get hurt. And when he does that move, Dave screamed like, "What are you doing?" And I told Kenny that, and Kenny started laughing, and he said he liked that part of wrestling, like giving fans that feeling and emotion and maybe even the nervousness going in. Like he used that to his advantage in that match, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. Okay. Right around this time, there's a combined ROH and New Japan show, and Omega and the Bucks win the Trios championships. And this is where they start all that New Day stuff. You remember, you know, because they win the Trios titles. So now they start to create this fictitious match with New Day, who's hot in WWE at this time. So Rolling Stone does an interview with Kenny Omega. And I remember being so surprised. I was like, Rolling Stone? Like, why are they doing wrestling for one? And if it's wrestling, why are they not talking to someone in WWE? Like, no one's going to read this thing. So Kenny Omega, I'll list some of the things that he talks about, which I found interesting. So he said that he saw that New Japan was no way prepared for AJ and Nakamura and the Good Brothers to leave, which in hindsight is like, I guess, but like, shouldn't you always be like, shouldn't you always have a plan B?
They never have a plan B.
I know.
They just assume that they're like business as usual unless something changes. And then something changes. They're like, oh my God, how could this happen?
So he also says, and this is fascinating to me, he says he and the Bucks were in the think tank so much so that they weren't even concentrating as much on their Tokyo Dome matches. So they knew pre-Wrestle Kingdom, because what they were trying to think about was how to deal with the fallout. And I'm assuming how to ascend the three of them into like a big part of this company. So that's kind of what they're thinking about as they're heading into this Tokyo Dome. He said Gedo came to him and said he's not going to challenge for the junior heavyweight title any longer and was putting him in the AJ Styles spot. He said NXT had built the strongest roster of any promotion on the planet. And the reason he went to New Japan was because he felt it was the best wrestling on the planet, and they were willing to spend money to expand worldwide. Kind of fascinating in hindsight, because we remember what those NXT shows were, he actually thought the NXT roster was the best roster in wrestling. And this is pre Adam Cole, pre Kyle O'Reilly, post, I guess, Devitt, who turns into Finn Balor.
Before the Nakamura debut?
Before the it's probably very similar time frame. Like he may be bucketing Nakamura into that, but I guess you would say Kevin Owens and but who was he was WWE at that point, but Kevin and Sammy are kind of part of that too. Mm-hmm. So I just thought that was interesting. He was so highly spoken of NXT. So then he said he said he was thinking about how much longer and what's left to prove doing 12-minute junior matches on the undercard, and was heavily considering leaving for NXT, and noted WWE had continuously pushed to get him back. He was with WWE in developmental years before, but had left WWE's developmental to go to New Japan. NXT being on the radar after like you're coming out of like this, or I guess going into this Tokyo Dome match, coming out of this Tokyo Dome match. That is fascinating to me, because you would think he would want to go to WWE main roster rather than NXT, but I don't know. And the NXT part of this conversation is fascinating to me, because what do we say today is, why are these guys going to NXT? Ricky Starks, why are you going to NXT? You should be on the main roster. And it's a little bit of like a, let me get my feet wet with how this company works kind of thing. But I do think it takes them down a notch. Like Ricky Starks could have come into WWE if they had a storyline for him waiting. Cody's best friend, and he comes into a big spot. It's very similarly to how, others have come in. But no, he's just an NXT. And by the time they finally debut him, it'll be many, many months after a crossover from AEW. But this is what Kenny was thinking in 2016. So that was kind of crazy to me.
Yeah. And the times are very different. And we mentioned that this was right in the kind of the middle of McMahonism in WWE, where Vince had kind of lost his mojo on that. And the booking was pretty god awful in 2016 through until Triple H took it. Well, not a little bit before that, right? It was just a little bit before that when the bloodline thing started to catch on and all that. And then, Vince had to go, and he should have been gone a long time before that. But in 2016, the main roster was pretty bad. NXT was the good show, the good alternative. I remember, what was it? I don't remember the exact year, but around this time, Ryan Ward, the NXT booker, I think wins Booker of the Year in the Observer Awards. So that show, the NXT show at the time, Sammy and Kevin for sure, but Neville was there. Claudio was there still at that point, and in and out.
Austin Aries, Austin Aries name drop there.
Yeah, there were some really, really good wrestlers, and for fans, that was kind of the exciting thing, because the booking was logical. It wasn't a huge time investment. It was a 1-hour show back then, and the storylines all made sense. And then you go and watch WWE, and a guy loses 3 weeks in a row and then gets a title shot, and this, that, and the other thing. It's just because plans are being literally tossed out the day of the show and thrown together in the last second, and it looked like it. Whereas NXT would have much longer storylines. I understand what Kenny liked about that. Those stories were more interesting. The Sami Zayn's ascension and getting past Claudio and getting to Neville and coming up, and then having to face his frenemy for life and Kevin Steen, Kevin Owens, all that worked. And so Kenny, for someone who loves that dramatic storytelling side of wrestling and doesn't only want to have a match, but he wants to have that kind of underlying years-long story behind it. NXT and New Japan were the two that were kind of doing that stuff back then, because I think if he had gone on Raw, you're going to wrestle this guy, and then you get there and he says, oh no, actually you're going to ride out on a bike with somebody else, and he would just been like, oh, the hell with it, I don't know what I'm doing. Just would have been too exhausting emotionally for Kenny, I think.
I do remember talking to him So it would have been, I can't remember which AEW conversation it was, but AEW had started and he was talking about the free agency aspect of it. And he said he was kind of burnt out from New Japan just because he was, for 2 years straight, just running hard. And he mentioned that, or actually 3 years straight running hard. He mentioned it crossed his mind that he could go to WWE, kind of turn his brain off and just make money. Like, not to say that he was going to dog it, but he didn't have to worry so much knowing that he wasn't going to have much creative control.
Yeah.
Any creative control. But just the idea of, okay, I'm just a hired gun. I'm just going to go out and do the things that they want me to do. I'll perform, but I don't have to do much else other than that because there's no reason for me to even think about stuff like that. And he did mention, I could turn my brain off. That was the verbiage that he used. So that was kind of interesting.
I get why Kenny was looking at NXT as like the boutique. I went to that Dallas show, the Takeover in Dallas in 2016. And like, you look at this card, right? It was Gable and Jason Jordan versus, the Revival, which is now FTR. You had Nakamura and Sami Zayn on this. You had Asuka and Bayley, Finn Balor and Samoa Joe. And yeah, you had Austin Aries and Baron Corbin, but, gonna gloss over that one. But you think about that and you think, okay, if Kenny Omega is looking at this and this is the level in which he can ply his craft and, maybe make some money, it's far different than the NXT in 2020 when AEW existed and WWE couldn't just pick and choose every single talent that they wanted when they wanted, according to when that contract was up. The game had changed at that point, but 2016, if you wanted to really, really make money, NXT was the only game in town. But, Kenny frankly chose the auteur method.
Okay, so he also said a key is creative freedom, and he and the Bucks wouldn't have had that in WWE. And he said that since the Bullet Club isn't really the Bullet Club anymore, they've decided to go full bore with the Elite, which is something they created themselves and could own, all the marketing and stuff and the gimmicks and the shirts. And then he said he's okay with still being part of the Bullet Club, but there's a place you can go to watch the most ridiculous and entertaining stuff in pro wrestling, and it's the Elite. With the Bullet Club, we had all sorts of wrestlers come and go. Some were good, some were bad, some were god-awful. Now, there has to be more of a distinction of who is doing what, which is why in this transition period, the guys who are really keeping this thing afloat are the Elite. Okay, so at this time, a young man, yeah, exactly.
Oh, Kenny.
A young man who at this point was called the Aerial Assassin joins Chaos. His name is Will Ospreay. And oh my God, he was almost unrecognizable on the Tokyo Dome show. Like, Jesus, who is? There was a couple times where I was like, okay, wait, who is? Oh shit, that's Ospreay.
Yeah, someone brought their kid to the ring with
guys,
him.
Right?
Yeah, there were a couple
guys on that card. You're just like, wow, look at you, baby boy.
Yeah. Will looked like he was 15. He looked like he was about 175 pounds. It was seeing that in stark contrast. It's remarkable how much he's filled out. Just and just built his body up. He was lanky. All that. Yeah,
just Sabre Jr.
baby faced, and in the literal sense, not the wrestling sense, just looked like somebody had brought their little brother to the ring with them. And then all of a sudden he explodes. And the athleticism on this show, by the way, ACH, Kota Ibushi, Ricochet, Will Ospreay, Hangman.
Hey, he was there. He was doing stuff.
Yeah, I don't think he's in the Will Ospreay Ricochet territory. He was doing stuff. Yes, that's
in trunks, right?
You can sum up Adam Page's entire career by he's doing stuff. Yes, that's
shade.
That's doing things. That's Adam Page for you. No, I'm just saying, like, there are guys that could just do phenomenal athletic feats in this show. And the first half of the show was really kind of an exhibition, because especially the early matches were all done pretty much full speed until you got to the later title matches. This is a sprint show for the first half.
They had early outs in their matches for sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so Tetsuya Naito wins the New Japan Cup, which sets him up for the title shot against Kazuchika Okada. And Naito beats Okada to win the strap. And, Dave's talking about how, or writing about how, business is kind of down and it's not as big as they expected it. So having Naito get a run will be a nice little shot in the arm. He's not going to hold it for long, as we know, but it was an opportunity for him to kind of do this Los Ingobernables thing. And obviously the fans were definitely in on it. He was beloved even as a heel. Like, they were just super interested into him. So Omega's first intercontinental title defense was going, like I mentioned, had to be against Elgin. But the stipulation when Tanahashi was still part of this match was Tanahashi would come out and he would go, okay, I want a shot. I want a shot at the title. And Omega would say no, except if we did a more American style match. Meet me on the top of the ladder, brother. And they were going to do the ladder match, but then this is when Tanahashi pulls out of the match. So instead, Michael Elgin gets put into the ladder match. Do you guys remember watching this match? I still have never seen this match.
Yes, I do remember this one. And there were a few things about it. There's just like, why in the world is Mike Elgin in a ladder match? I asked that question going into the match. I asked it again when it was over. It was fine, mostly because of Kenny, but it was not an all-time classic. And I feel like this a lot when New Japan tries to do Western style pro wrestling, is that it just feels like a discount version of it. They just don't know how to quite make it their own. And it just looks like a poor version of something that we see over here. And Kenny did all he could, but it was not a classic, and there's a reason they don't do them very often.
You remember this, Jeremy?
No, in all honesty, I don't.
What I remember was the discourse, because one of the thoughts was Omega has to be a little bit more serious in order to be presented as a main eventer.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing a ladder match into New Japan Pro Wrestling was like the worst thing in the world. And in a sense, what Omega's character was he was saying, like, look, this old traditional New Japan stuff, we got to put that in the past. We have to expand. We got to internationalize this thing. And I am the future. Okada is what you guys wanted the future to be, but I'm actually the future. So I understand adding something like this, as long as the product doesn't change and as long as the product doesn't become this thing. But we still see those kinds of matches every once and again today. It's like they don't overdo them, but when they do them, they overdo them in a sense. Like, it's kind of over the top in the way that they do them.
Yeah, it's not a good version of whatever it is they're trying to portray.
Right.
And
Okay, so then at this time, and I actually do have a date here, May 21st, 2016, sorry. A young man by the name of Cody Runnels quits WWE. Cody Runnels, after quitting, wrote a long statement explaining his decision. He was very careful when it came to McMahon and Triple H, even though McMahon is the one who nixed his switch back to Cody Rhodes and slotted him in the position he was in as Stardust. Instead, he lashed out at the head writers of Raw and SmackDown, Ed Koskey and Ryan Ward, saying, one pretending to be Brian Gewirtz, it's Koskey shade, and the other too busy hitting on developmental divas.
Yikes.
Shots fired.
Wow. Hey, look, I mean, you can call a man a lot of things, but calling him a bad Brian Gewirtz, that's just vicious. Just vicious. I mean, the man that gave us some of the absolute dirt worst segments in the history of wrestling, now that's just uncalled for. I can't stand for that.
Oh, my God.
That's pretty fierce stuff from Cody right there. We knew he was unhappy. We didn't know just how unhappy he was, but would turn up in New Japan not too long after. And he's here on this card in the middle of it with Juice Robinson. It's just a funny journey.
And with brown hair, not even blonde. Hair,
Bullet Club, and as a heel.
Yeah.
Very different.
In hindsight, everything that Cody did just feels so calculated.
Very
Like
much so.
he may not have known what he was doing, but it felt like when he did it with intention.
I think the people that he worked with felt that there was specific intention in there as well. Okay, so this is why Cody was pissed. In February, he was told that he'd switch back to being Cody Rhodes. There was a meeting with Vince McMahon. Now, you got to remember, this is not that far after his pops passes away, right? So he's got he's he really needs this emotionally as well to turn back into a non-joke of a character. And he had all new gear made. He starts teasing it on Twitter. And so Dave wrote that since it never happened, he thought that Cody was just kind of playing political games in a sense. But that actually wasn't the case. The change was supposed to happen right after WrestleMania, and then Vince himself personally nixed it. And so that's why Cody was so pissed leaving WWE. But very strategically, did not blame Triple H or Vince McMahon. Knowing somewhere down the line, he's going to have to work with these dudes again.
He's a politician.
At least he hopes. Yeah. At least
he's a politician. One of the better examples of betting on yourself and winning in wrestling history, really. Not too many people have pulled off the trick as well as Cody has.
All right. So around this time as well, the famous or infamous, depending on what side of the fence you sit, Ospreay and Ricochet match, the GIF heavy match, where they do those spots that would be copied over and over and over again, happens during the Best of Super Juniors. Dave gave it a 4 3/4 star rating, but did have both sides of the case. Why some people don't like it, but why it's also great and possibly the future of wrestling. But that happened. Ospreay also wins the Super Juniors. So we get to the G1, which Omega wins, and he beats Naito, and then he beats Goto to win the G1. He beats Naito in his B block. Mm-hmm. That's the match I wanted to rewatch if I had the time, and I could not. I could not get to getting to that match because that's the one I was like, okay, I need to watch this match. And just so much crazy stuff happened, as Jeremy knows, this weekend where I lost many hours. And he beats Goto to win the G1. And there's this story of Hiroki Goto not being able to win the big one, which played out this year. So this was a kind of a fun look back into the history of Hiroki Goto in that sense, even though this podcast is not necessarily about him. Okay, so Kenny Omega's asked about WWE again, and he says, they got in touch with me 3 times last year. This year, I've heard Triple H wants me, but I haven't talked with them directly. Even if I did, I wouldn't be going anywhere. So this is sometime in the summer. So Omega against Goto at Kings of Pro Wrestling, and Omega wins again to lock in his title opportunity at the Tokyo Dome. Because there was some thought that, okay, Omega wins the G1, but they may still finagle him at some point, and the match at Wrestle Kingdom might not be Omega and Okada. It could be Naito and Okada again. But no, they lock it in. It's Kenny Omega, and he's going to be in the main event at the Tokyo Dome. So in November, Dave writes, it's a real test, as even though Okada versus Omega is likely to be an exceptional match, match quality isn't what draws, let alone when you're running a baseball stadium. There have been no statements at all regarding ticket sales, either officially or unofficially, past that seats are available in every price range. So that says the advance is not at the level of at least some of the recent years, particularly in 2014 when they did 36,000 fans for Tanahashi Okada and Nakamura Kota Ibushi. So in the buildup at Power Struggle, Omega does in fact pin Okada in an 8-man tag team. It was the Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Adam Cole Baby beating Okada, Will Ospreay, Hiroki Goto, and Geto. And so the lead to the match is that Omega pins Okada in this 8-man. So then we get to Wrestle Kingdom 11. And here's where we will start the watchback version, the categories and questions that I will ask both of these guys. Okay. Do you guys remember on January 4th, 2017, what the biggest movie in the United States was?
No, I don't.
Star Wars movie.
Rogue One, baby.
There you have it.
I couldn't remember what Star Wars movie, but I was like, it's a Star Wars movie.
I'm 0 for 1 on that one. Here's where I'm the outlier, and I'm just going to do this, say this, and then duck underneath my desk while people throw things. I saw the original 3 Star Wars movies. Haven't seen one since, and I only watched the first 3 once.
Look behind me. I'm a nerd.
Jeremy's watched it enough for all of us.
Yes.
I hope I got that one right.
By the way, the top song was Starboy by The Weeknd featuring Daft Punk. The top TV shows around this time, The Walking Dead, The Big Bang Theory,
sure,
Sunday Night Football, which will be the biggest show seemingly for the rest of our lives.
Yes.
And Orange is the New Black on streaming. Which
Grey's Anatomy still wasn't hot as fire at the point.
I guess not, but from a longevity standpoint, I'm sure it wins the race there. Okay, now Wrestle Kingdom 11. Did you watch this live, Steven? Did you watch it on a thumb drive again? Like, what was your
This was the first Wrestle Kingdom I watched on New Japan World. I did watch this on an NJPW World, and I do recall staying up. I just decided to stay up and roll all night on it, probably with coffee. I don't remember that specifically, but almost certainly did. But this one I was fired up about. As most people that watch our show know, Wrestle Kingdom is the birthday present to me every year. My birthday is January 4th. And so I'm off anyway. And usually that day I take the floating holiday thing. And so that day I was up with my bag of kettle chips and ready to go.
And opening day of Chicago Cubs baseball.
Yeah. I allow myself to have kettle chips on opening day and Wrestle Kingdom day, and there you go. That was so I had my bag of chips, and I actually do remember sitting there with the chips and watching this on this new device. I was on a laptop. I did not know how to get it to work on a TV yet. I have since figured all that out, and it all just goes to my smart TV. But back then, a little trickier. I was watching it on a laptop on a chaise lounge.
So all 5 hours, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed?
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed is a lot to say. I think there might have been a couple of nod-offs in the middle there during probably the 6-man tag gauntlet match, I'd imagine. But the rest held my attention. I was awake for all of it right there. I crashed out not long after, but I did stay up and watched it live. And I was, especially in the main event, I was awake and alert during that son of a gun.
All right, Jeremy, when did you watch this show? I don't know if you watched it live, because I know I didn't.
I did not watch it live. That was the year I went to Lake Tahoe for my birthday, which is around that time of year. It's a couple days after Wrestle Kingdom. So I don't think I caught it until a while after, because I didn't have the streaming capability to get to it at the time. Like, it was not as easy as it is now, even though World was still in existence. You know, like, didn't have all the money in the world after a trip like that. So it took me a while to watch it. I don't remember exactly when, but I think it was a little while after. And then the year after that was the one where I was just locked in. Like, I'm not missing Wrestle Kingdom again. So.
Yeah, I think I mean, I told Kenny this on air, so I'm not afraid to say it, but I didn't watch this show. And when I saw Dave's rating of the match, that is when I was like, okay, I need to find this match. And of all places, Vimeo had it. Somebody uploaded it on Vimeo, and I was able to watch the match there. And I remember saying to Dave, because you know, people think, oh, you know, the Dave Meltzer star rating system is insane now. When he gave this star, well, we can give this away because people already know this is famously a 6-star match. And when I saw the rating, I was like, oh my gosh, I really need to see this. And he told this same story to Steve Austin, or he had this conversation with Steve Austin when, you know, he said, he was either on a podcast or in the Observer where he said it's the best. It may be the best match that he'd ever seen. And Austin texted him or something and said, are you shitting me? And Dave was like, nope. And so then Austin then had to watch it and was amazed, himself, which was different from a lot of the old school folks, because the argument was that Dave is out of his mind, and what Omega and Okada did wasn't actually professional wrestling. There were too many high spots and this and that, and they had all these problems with it, right? So when I watched it, I really, really liked it, but I actually liked the Tanahashi and Okada match from the previous year better, but it was more because it's like more my style of pro wrestling and what I like. It wouldn't be until I started to watch more of Kenny's work until I went, okay, like I really do get it now. I really get like a lot of this stuff where people think he's just, doing these moves for no reason. Like there is actually real thought involved here. But that was like the consensus was one side of the fence was Kenny's the next thing. And the other side was, he's doing too many flips and too many dives and he's not selling enough and XYZ. And that's where we were in 2017. So I had to watch it after the fact. And I even told Dave, I kind of like the other match better. He's like, yeah, that's totally fine, because that was a great match too. But then in rewatching it, I was like, okay, I get it. Or just kind of watching more of Kenny, I was like, I get it. There's more to him that people just don't understand. And so I was converted to be a Kenny guy. Okay. Now let's talk about what has aged well and what hasn't aged very well. And I thought, obviously the main event match, the Omega and Okada match, ages extremely well. I don't know what you guys think of it in the ranking of the 4 matches. Is it the third best is it the second best? Where do you guys sit with how you rank these, Steven?
No, this one's my favorite.
This is my over the last one.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And the part of it was the surprise of how good this was. Watching it, you knew it was going to be good, but no one knew it was going to be this good. And it didn't have the heavy expectations that the other ones did, all of which were great. But just the way this one built, the way, Kenny hitting that springboard moonsault to Okada when he's out by the announce desk, which was an insane move that he managed to hit, almost overshot him, but he managed to hit it. And then him doing the double stomp on the table, it just looks so bleak for Okada. It just looks so bleak. And that's what got the crowd into the bit of a frenzy, is when Okada started showing his perseverance and kicking out of things. And just the way that thing built toward the end, the different ways they had of Okada getting in and out of the one-winged angel position and just barely escaping it, knowing that would be curtains for him. The whole story is that the one-winged angel is the most vicious thing anyone can take. And just his desperation and machinations to get in and out of that move and the threat of it happening. The crowd would shriek when he would get the electric chair position and just start reaching for him, and they knew how to draw that out. Okada's timing and all that. This one's my favorite one because I didn't know it was going to be like this coming into it. Mm-hmm. So when they went at it again at Dominion, when they redid it at Dominion, you were very excited about it because we had just seen this match that was just one of the best matches we'd ever seen. Then it goes to the 1 hour draw, and it was exciting. But you kind of got the idea that I thought they were going to do the draw before it happened. I predicted the draw on that. I thought they're going to go an hour just to show that they can do it. And then after that, they did the G1 thing where Kenny finally got the win on him, but it didn't quite count. So all this carrot continues on the stick. Another terrific match.
But the one thing about that third match is you're assuming, because it's only a 30-minute time limit, that if they just did a 1 hour, they quite possibly could do 30 minutes again.
Sure.
And then you got the surprise victory out of that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And then so the last one there, the one that went more than an hour, brilliant, love it. Probably my second favorite of the batch. And it's a wonderful match with a lot of twists and turns and things. For me, I felt it a little bit again when I rewatched it for this broadcast, but afterwards, after that Wrestle Kingdom 11 match, just the atmosphere, the way the crowd was reacting, it just blows you away. And it just like remember that it was great, and then I'm watching it again, it's like, my God, this is fantastic. And the others had all that expectation on it. So just this surprise of I had no idea I was going to see something like this in the Dome, in Wrestle Kingdom, at the biggest possible stage for it. The others were Dominion and the G1. This was in the Dome.
Yep.
To me, it adds now that's a joke, right? Hey, another star because it's in the Dome, but that's not what I'm talking about. Just the fact that two people stepping up on the largest possible stage they can have.
Yeah.
To me, that was what made that one my favorite.
I think it's my favorite too, and it's for similar but not quite the same logic. And we're in a generational time with pro wrestling that if two wrestlers run it back, they trade wins, or there's a little bit of equality somewhere in the feuding among two top stars. Everybody gets something out of it. When you do it the first time, there's a definitive winner, and there's something real about that one, even in a fake business. And you go that 48 minutes that you have that first match, and you have all the finishes, you have all like the near finishes and everything like that. And when it was over, it's like you felt like the two best in the world met for the first time, and you got a winner. There was the best in the world, and now there is the best in the world. And you knew when you watched it again that they were going to have that same level of intensity in their New Japan matchups. But you could almost hedge towards who was going to win or who was going to lose or how it was going to go. Maybe not quite the draw, but you knew eventually Omega was going to win that match eventually. But in that first one, you didn't know. And that's the part about it all for me.
All right. What are some of the other things that when you were watching this card, you thought that it would fit into kind of wrestling today? I thought the semi-main event was fantastic. I really, really liked that match, and we'll get to star ratings at the end of this because I'm interested in what you guys think Dave rated some of these matches. We know what he rated Omega and Okada. I thought that was fantastic. I thought the Goto and Shibata match, just from the storyline perspective of what Kevin Kelly was saying back then, I don't even think I realized back then that there was this story of Goto not being able to win the big one. And then it crystallizes just this year when he does, and he kind of shocks the wrestling world when he does do it. I thought that also really aged well. What about you guys? Anything else?
Yeah, well, that aged beautifully, and there's so many layers to that match. One is, the Goto and Shibata came up together, and they knew each other, and they were schoolmates. And then Shibata was in New Japan with Goto, and then he left and went to do K1, and he went to do Deep, which is an MMA promotion for a while. And when he came back, the entire storyline was, you left us when things were bad. You took off. We stayed. And so there was all this tension with. Probably some of it was probably true, which is what made it better. But with Nakamura, certainly with Tanahashi, with Goto, and then Goto was the one that extended the olive branch that you can come back into the New Japan fold. And so that had a deep story that went years with Shibata and Goto, and then they were in World Tag League together, all this stuff. And Goto had that reputation of failing, and he had done so earlier. There was actually one more that I forgot about this, Garrett. There was another Okada title defense in 2016. It was against Goto. And it was the night he painted his body white and put all of the kanji on painted it like Jinsei Shinzaki when he was Hakushi used to do. And came out with the whole white outfit when he was in black and red and gold usually. And it was this whole thing where, I failed so many times and this is it. And he lost again. Then he got to the G1 finals and he lost again. And then he had another shot at Kenny's briefcase. I think there actually was a briefcase back then for that contract. And people, they love briefcases in wrestling. You can hit people with them. And he lost again, so coming into here, the mountain he has to climb is his oldest friend and his enemy, but a guy that he finally said, you can be part of New Japan again. I think you are one of us again. He was the one that shook his hand and said, you can come back into the fold. To fast forward through that, now that's the mountain he's got to climb. The guy that he let back in, now that's his problem. And for him to overcome that and win, there was a real catharsis in that victory. You heard it in the crowd, and then they were able to rebuild all that after the death of his father and everything else, a new beginning this year. And when Goto does get that win, when he finally climbs the mountain, the people are 100% there for it. That aged beautifully. It worked in January of 2017, and it worked in February of 2025. And everybody loves Goto, man. He's the sentimental favorite, and you can see the seeds of it then.
Jeremy, do you have anything that also aged well?
The whole story of Goto winning the big one, and the fact that we had just come off, Goto having the world title run for 5 months. And in my explanation to Steven, even though it was a depressing end and all the news that has since come out that he will not be in the G1, don't be sad it's over. Be happy that it happened for Goto in the world title. And that's how I stand on that. As for the rest of this card, there are a couple matches that could happen tomorrow on TV. The Young Bucks versus Roppongi Vice. Both teams are currently in existence on AEW. Kyle O'Reilly could have a match with Adam Cole.
I feel like we see those two guys together in some form or fashion, like every week.
I wrote that down in my notes
4 months ago or something.
I'm going to go kick it back to you, Jeremy. Absolutely right. I had it in my notes. There's this line where it said, I think these two are going to be feuding forever. And I thought, no kidding. Boy, howdy. We did not know how
and
right.
Then, like aging well, that Cody match feels like you watch it on SmackDown every 2 weeks.
The only
it was a very specific, it was like very deliberate, not great, not bad, serviceable TV match.
For all the hints of Cody going heel, it'll be very curious to rewatch this match and then see what cadence of heel he carries himself with now, with years later, all that experience under his belt. That I'm curious about.
He's not a bad heel in that match at 11. He's not a bad heel at all. And it reminded me, like, oh yeah, he can do that. He can do that. So if they decide to swing that other way, and I guess you always do eventually, right?
He even did the dashing pose in that match.
Yes, he did.
That popped me. I like that.
The other thing is, by the way, guys, I don't know if you had the same experience I did, but his music hit, and it's the music he's using right now. That carried through everything. And when he came out there, was there a moment where you were just, even though you intellectually knew it was going to happen, a moment when, oh wait, no one's saying whoa. I'm just programmed for the whole crowd to just go, whoa, and of course the Japanese fans are sitting there very politely watching. It's like, oh, here are these two people we don't really know all that well. And Juice has been there most of the year. They were getting used to Juice, but
clean cut Juice, by the way.
Yeah. Rainbow.
So he had been, this was 8 months or 7 months after he had walked away from WWE.
Yeah, or so, something like that. He was at
he was there in
January
again. His NXT name was
CJ Parker. Yeah, he was in January. He was in New Japan. It was starting to appear on cards then.
Got it.
So he'd been there most of the year, but not in a very prominent spot. Also fun to. I always do this. You see who all the young lions were around the ring. You had Tomoaki Oka.
I saw Hinare.
I saw
Hinare there. Yeah. Hinare, he was a child. He was
a
child. Watto was there, and Kitamura, who passed away a few years later.
Right.
And may have had the most charisma of that batch. And he was down there. He and Oka had debuted against each other at Alliance Pride event earlier the year. So they were very new in their careers. So, yeah.
Kikuchi was around the ringside as well. And he's always around the ringside.
Always around. Yeah.
Kind of guiding the action for the wrestlers before and after things are going.
Wasn't CJ Parker also the name of Pamela Anderson's character on Baywatch?
CJ, it might have been. Yeah.
I need to look this up. What was Juice? Because it wasn't. Isn't there like gimmick infringement?
Did I have that wrong?
Same name. No, I think it's the same exact name.
CJ Parker, WWE. Yeah. Yeah, he was CJ Parker in WWE. And although the first Google thing that comes up is Pamela. So there you go. Go figure.
So it's Baywatch. You need to get your trademarks.
They filmed Baywatch on my beach growing up in Huntington Beach.
Oh, did they?
They did. Funny.
Did you ever see Hogan and Savage hanging and banging?
No, I was not allowed to go to that show when I was a young pup.
Because they had Baywatch angles.
Yeah, they only did the extra footage, like shooting on scene when the sunrise and the sun setting, so that you had like the lifeguard tower with the right sun at the angle, all those kind of exterior shots they would film.
Who was the one that was in Under Siege 2? She was in Under Siege 2. She was one of the lifeguards. Doggone it, I don't know. That was the one I had a crush on back in the day.
Wasn't that the one that was also on Charles in Charge back in the day?
Whoa, that's a deep cut. That could be true. That could be true. All right.
I know what you're talking about.
We're digressing here, but that was So seeing all those guys, seeing the young lions around ringside is always fascinating. And of course, by then, Finlay was basically a young lion who had graduated.
Erica Leniak.
Yeah, I had a big crush on Erica. But Finlay was up in there, and he was basically a young lion, just a kind of the guy that would eat a lot of pins. And he was on this show there. I think he was one of the 6-man champions coming in with Satoshi Kojima and Ricochet. That's a trio right there. Kojima, Ricochet, and Finlay. That's it's just kind of a disparate set of people.
By the way, she was on Charles in Charge, and she was also on Silver Spoons, which even takes us further back. Okay. What hasn't aged very well? I have 3, and I'll get my 3 out of the way, and you guys can discuss yours. Loved the Naito Tanahashi match. That match, fantastic. What hasn't aged well is how they moved today versus how they were moving in that match, because I thought they moved so well, and if they had that match today, it would be kind of sad. Because what it did is I was watching it, and it just made me sad for how they move today. The other two are hair related. Cody's hair, obviously brown instead of blonde, and Ricochet has hair when his entire gimmick in AEW is that he's bald. So the hair's gone.
Jughead Ricochet.
he did not look like the same dude on that show with hair, which was kind of funny. What about you guys? Do you guys have any things that didn't age well?
I'll just mention it here. This is before Tomohaki Onma's catastrophic injury that paralyzed him for a while.
Right.
And this is where you can really see what Honma was. And he was never a fantastic wrestler, but there was an underdog charisma to him that you just willed him to do something in these matches. And Makabe was a wonderful, wonderful partner for him because he had the Unchained Gorilla. So he could play the Ricky Steamboat, the Ricky Morton babyface in peril, sell, and barely stay alive. And the crowd would just will him to tag Makabe, who could kill anybody, right? That was and even then you would see it in 2017. They won World Tag League twice.
Right.
If Makabe got tagged in, anything is possible. All things can happen. And there was just an undeniable underdog charisma of him. He's a sentimental guy within New Japan now, so they keep Honma around. He just can't move much. And watching him here, you think, oh, it's a reminder that at a while his matches were electric in their own way. They weren't all-time classics. He's not piling up the stars, but there was something undeniable about Honma that you just rooted for him just out of instinct. By the end of it, you're just jumping up and down if he could just make that tag. He was great at that. And you saw it a little bit in this.
And it would be sad when he would come back and you're like, this dude is clearly not right.
Yes. Yeah.
And
you're worried about
it. He shouldn't be in this match. He can't even do this thing that
every bump he takes, I'm worried about him.
Yeah.
Is he going to re-injure himself? I mean, he was very close to never walking again. And it's a little spooky sometimes.
Jeremy, do you have any?
Well, I had to do the math in my head when Billy Gunn came out for the Rumble and they mentioned that he was 53 years old. And then I was like, okay, so it's 2017 and we are now in 2025. Billy Gunn is 61 years old, featured on AEW as, the cheerleader for, a 5-tool prospect, 5-tool player over there. So you got that. And then, that never open weight 6-man gauntlet match when the Satoshi Kojima leading the young kids, Ricochet and David Finlay. And I just looked at David Finlay and I was just like, brother, you gotta go to the gym. Like, you are looking a little soft in all the places.
You think about that. Here's a statement you will not hear in 2025. In this show, Yujiro Takahashi was in better shape than David Finlay was, because Yujiro was kind of built and
Yujiro was the most in shape guy in Bullet Club in that match for sure. He was
my God,
in better shape than Fale, and he's probably in better shape than Hangman Page. Page was, he was lifting and he looked like a wrestler, but he was not, conditioning himself, if you will. Like he wasn't making the money to be the body guy.
You just reminded me of one, and this would happen with Maria Kanellis a lot, which is the way that they would shoot the scantily clad valets.
Yeah. Perv cam was in effect here. Yeah.
I don't think they would get away with that today, doing that. But Brad has a great one, actually. And this one makes me mad because one of my worries about Omega Okada at All In is the announcing. And Brad mentioned Kevin Kelly's career in 2024 has not aged well, because Kevin Kelly was a little goofy on this show, I thought, but a lot of it was a little bit of like just to show that he does know his stuff about New Japan, like insidery kind of stuff. And Steve Corino, I wouldn't consider Corino a good announcer, and it would get better when he left, because Corino would leave to WWE right after this, and then Don Callis would come in, and the announcing got better when Callis came in. But yeah. I'm really not bothered, but I'm bummed, because this version of Kevin Kelly, who's in a lawsuit with AEW and whatever, in my mind, if I could erase all of that stuff and just have him call this fifth match, it would be amazing, because he would know all the little beats to the other four matches. And even though Omega said on the show that I did with Dave Meltzer the other day that he considers this kind of outside of this series, he believes it needs to kind of exist in its own, because
I'll bet. Don't compare it to those.
Well, also 7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And he was, as he said, we kind of talked about this, which is there's going to be a large part of that audience that doesn't even really know those matches as well as we know them. And so they have to kind of, that match has to exist in its own AEW universe. And I'm just going to be so bummed, because there are going to be so many opportunities for callbacks. And I think Excalibur will do his best, but he's going to have Taz sandbagging him left and right on this match. I literally hope that they just put tape over Taz's mouth and say, don't say anything, because this is actually serious business. What were you going to say?
Do you think Chris Sampson's going to get an opportunity to send some stats Tony Khan's way to make sure that his announcers do their homework?
Well, I remember, and so Brad mentioned that Jim Ross will be on the call, and Don Callis will probably be there as well.
That's not good news either.
You remember when Jim was calling the New Japan stuff, and then he would do stuff with the Axis matches when they would replay them with him and Josh Barnett. Like Dave was the one writing the emails directly to Jim. He's like, okay, here's the backstory. Here are the things you need to kind of think about as you're calling this match. And Dave would send him notes. But yeah, this is not going to be the same call as it was. And that's going to bother me.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah. Jim Ross on this. Jim Ross on New Japan doesn't mix. It's just oil and water. He was bad on that Access show. Yeah.
There are going to be parts of this match that he's going to call better than anybody, but there's going to be parts of this match that he's going to think that he needs to call, and he's just not going to be quick enough. He's not going to know enough. He's going to go to like some old tried and true Ross-ism. And it's going to be on Excalibur really to keep up with the action, which from an action perspective, Excalibur will be able to keep up with the moves.
I mean, he screams the names of moves well. That's what Excalibur contributes to AEW TV. Is he screams the names of moves.
You know who they now they don't want to. You don't want to tell your audience that your announcers aren't good enough. But if I could pull an announcer out of my ass and put him on this show, it'd be Mauro Ranallo.
That would be interesting.
Mauro Ranallo called the New Japan stuff before Ross did, and then
Yeah.
Morrow went to WWE, and that opened up the position for Ross.
Get some Walker over there.
What?
Get Walker over there.
Oh yeah, we talked about Walker too. Walker would be great. I think he would be fantastic. But then again, you're showing up your own announcers.
Yeah. It won't happen, but I would have confidence with Walker. Maybe other people don't, but I would be confident.
I absolutely.
What other people are you talking about, Jeremy? I can't figure it out.
I don't know who you're talking about. I didn't go get the screen.
What is a 2017 moment that you saw when you were watching this? I will say we still have super kicks in wrestling today, but the young bucks were definitely on there. Let's do a million super kicks at every opportunity to piss off the audience, and they did that in the Rocky match. Even though the match with Rocky and Trent, by the way, also looks like a different human in this match. They didn't have that much time, but they got their worth of super kicks in. But that was the thing that stood out to me of 2017.
Trent almost killed himself. The tope con hilo to the floor too. He does a dive, a tope con hilo over the top rope. The Bucks, one pulls the other one out of the way, and he just splatters on that over the top rope all the way to the floor and splatters in the aisle. It would have been the bump of the night if it weren't for the Omega backdrop onto the table later.
Right. That was crazy.
It was. Yeah. Both of those were just, were gonzo. Yeah. I remember thinking that the toughest part of the Young Bucks has to be their thighs from slapping it to cover the fact that they missed those kicks by about 8 to 12 inches every time. You're like, oh, but boy, it made a huge sound though. Must have connected. No, it's
do you think
foot and a half between them, but do
you think that there's like, scar tissue that has just been built up over the years? Like if they as they're changing and they're getting into their gear, there's like this like calloused area on their leg because they've done so many super kicks over the years.
Yeah, I think so. I honestly want to ask this question someday. I don't know what context I could ever do it, but I want to ask somebody like Tanahashi, do chops even hurt anymore? Have you taken so many chops? Do they even hurt? They just killed all the nerve cells because he takes, so many chops in New Japan, and he's, in almost all of these matches with guys that chop. And I just wonder if you're in the ring that long, did they even register anything? Like, do they hurt the same way? Like, do they, maybe not.
Yeah. Why doesn't Tanahashi's chest look like Dusty's forehead did?
Right. Yeah. I guess it just builds up. I don't know. It's good.
Anything 2017 about this
thing to me is when you look at this entire card and you see everybody that's no longer there, right? Like the first match, the second match, there's 3 people left in the never open weight 6-man match, but almost everyone else on this roster is gone or injured or retiring or going on it. And you think you're like, my God, for this generation, the only ones that are still standing really are Evil and Sonata and this team with Bushi. And the bones of LIJ at the time is basically the healthiest aspect left on this roster in 2025. And I'm just like, damn, that's actually amazing to me. Yeah. Like Ishida and Hiromu are back, but like even Hiromu's part of that LIJ faction, and that's not a main event match anymore. That is not even close to a Tokyo Dome match.
Yeah, and Garrett, you asked like what's very 2017. I thought of one more here, just in the Ring of Honor being a thing,
right?
Yeah, and Ring of Honor being a major part of this program, and stars from Ring of Honor being, but just Ring of Honor as a self-contained unit, as that little bastion of great wrestling in the United States. Like this is where you go to see the really. I know PWG was around, but that's what I think of when I watch this stuff. Was just like, wow, Ring of Honor was pretty captivating back then. And I'm not, and they have good talent now, but it's kind of buried back on Honor Club, and no one really sees it the same way as this unit. It was really something that you could get behind. It was an alternative to WWE, not financially, not with the national television and things, but it presented a different type of wrestling that fit in better with New Japan strong style. And just the idea of being invested in what's going on in Ring of Honor, that felt very 2017 to me. That's just not around anymore.
Yeah.
And the other thing, by the way, since then, I just want to mention this: Kenta Sato, the referee, has aged not a single day since this show to now. If you go back and watch Kenta Sato, he looks exactly the same. Someone needs to consult with that guy, find out what he's doing, because everybody else, me especially, looks like crap considering how I looked on that day. And then Kenta Sato just rolling through life. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Cameos. We talked about some of the young lions, which were nice little Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing most of the cameos would come out of the Rambo match, unless we were talking about the scantily clad valets, because one of those valets would become pretty famous for a little while there.
Peter. Yeah, Peter was in there.
And I was going to say Cheeseburger was maybe my favorite cameo of all the wrestlers.
Cheeseburger's fabulous. Yeah, I'm enough of a New Japan history nerd that I was pretty excited with Koniaki Kobayashi.
I figured you
those
were
cool. Those were very, very, very cool.
Yeah, I dorked out for that one for sure. I remember seeing his matches against the original Tiger Mask and all that. That was he was a pretty fierce heel in that era. So to see him come back and do a couple of signature spots was pretty neat and not too much. Yeah. Careful with the old man there, and they were pretty careful with him. But I like that. Hiro Saito, to a lesser extent too, was another guy from back in the day that I enjoyed seeing. So. The Rumble or Rambo, I guess it's called now. It was called the New Japan Rumble back then. Was fun for me to watch for that reason. It wasn't a great match, but just a couple of nostalgic moments.
I was amused with Norton. Norton.
Yeah, Norton was very cool. Norton is very cool.
And then
Norton's a really cool guy. I like Scott Norton. I met him. He's a really cool dude.
I will say I feel like Hangman Page had a cameo on this thing. Like he was there and then he was gone in the beginning of this match, and it was fun, and he did a thing. He's like, oh wow, a really young Hangman Page. Mm-hmm. Oh wow, a really young Will Ospreay. All in this match, and they had a couple of brief moments, and nothing to Will got him with a tope or something on the outside, and then that was that. And then they met up 9 years later for an amazing singles match, and that was something to think about all that time ago.
The other question is something that surprised you in a good or bad way, and I'll just do mine. I already mentioned it. Just a waste of Kota Ibushi on this show. Now, some people may say, ACH or whatever. ACH, I don't know his career very well. I remember when he came into WWE and he had that thing where his T-shirt was very like it was just a bad stereotype of some sort that WWE is just deaf about. But yeah, it was Kota Ibushi to me. I'm like, okay, so Dave Meltzer's writing that this dude should be in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom 11 before in the year-long build, and he's in the second match on the show under a mask for whatever reason in a 6-minute 34-second match against Tiger Mask W versus Tiger the Dark.
Yeah, it was a commercial. It was an ad. Yeah, the match was an ad. They were promoting the reboot of Tiger Mask W, the anime series, and that's why we had this. So Tiger the Dark was the heel in the anime series, just like the Black Tiger, which was eventually played by Mark Rocco and Eddie Guerrero and Rocky Romero at various points. Was the heel in the original Tiger Mask series. So this thing was being rebooted, and they wanted to have a match that promoted it. So they had two really athletic guys, ACH and Ibushi, and stuck them in masks that did not allow them to see what the hell they were doing. Because if you look at those masks, they aren't the ones that are tight to the face, the way lucha masks are and this thing was made so that they would look more like the character. So it was 3D. It had a snout. It had a snout. Instead of just hugging the guy's face, they couldn't see what they were doing. And you can see that there were times when they were unsure, where neither one of them was used to the gimmick. Neither one of them wrestled under masks in any other real circumstance. And it's funny because I remember this match disappointing me at the time. And I actually wrote in my notes, like, this isn't good, but it's better than I remember it, which shows you the expectations I had in the first place. ACH and Kota Ibushi, hell yes, right? And then you get this careful match because no one can quite see where they are with this stupid mask on the front. The only time they ever did it, either character, by the way.
It was like if you went to a theme park and you saw the mascots at the theme park or the characters just with the mask and not with any of the bodysuit. That's what they look like in the ring.
Yeah, big disappointment there. But I mean, they did the best they could, and the match isn't actually terrible. Now that I watch it, it's just I was ready for something really spectacular, like the year they opened with Ibushi versus Ospreay. That was just, we're opening Wrestle Kingdom with this. Like, oh yeah, I kind of thought that's what we were going to get here, and we didn't get that. So that was a disappointment. That was a mistake in hindsight, but it was basically a commercial, 6-minute commercial.
Yep.
For me, I was pleasantly surprised with this Shibata versus Goto match because it was the blueprint for all of his world title matches that he had. And I was watching like, this is exactly what he was doing in all of his world title matches. So if you really just want to scratch that itch and, get a couple more of those under your belt, go back and watch his Goto versus Shibata match from Wrestle Kingdom 11. Maybe a couple months ago, Shibata was chirping in the newspapers, before Forbidden Door, that he wanted to face Goto and run it back one more time for the title. I definitely don't think that is the plan. I'm probably going to be Shibata and Tanahashi if they were smart at all. That's the one time that they can do it. But man, if you're missing the Goto revolution, this match is something that can scratch that itch for sure.
So when it comes to this next question, I think there are some very easy answers. This one, I didn't really find one, but if you could change the result of one match on this card, what would it be? Now, I think in a very interesting trajectory would be, what if Kenny Omega won this match? That would be kind of interesting. Where do they go from here? The one that I thought, though, is, and you guys have more knowledge about this than I do, so I'll kind of say it and then I'll lay out a little bit. But the Young Bucks losing and not being portrayed as, really more than just Kenny Omega's sidekicks is an interesting thing to think about, considering where they got in the U.S. Even, recently they were IWGP champions, but still, like, I don't sense that the New Japan home audience really thinks that they're all that special or that they've been pushed in any sort of big deal. But just like, if you look back and you go, wow, the Bucks should have been bigger in New Japan than they actually were. Some of that has to do with being presented as the junior tag team. But at the same time, you just think like, man, like, I wonder if New Japan would have bought into them. I wonder if they would have been bigger stars there. It seems like they would to me, but there's got to be a reason why they didn't.
I thought it had everything to do with, setting up a psychology about Kenny Omega potentially beating, his friends lost. It sets up that psychological, he's probably going to win then, because if they, it just reverse psychology more than anything else. And it could not be the case. I had another potential what if about this card, but when it comes to that one, it feels like the likeliest thing that you could have flipped and it wouldn't have changed the landscape of New Japan either way.
Yeah. I mean, you wonder, I mean, in hindsight, you wish they would have just kind of downshifted Michael Elgin out of there. Yeah, of course. That was so when I first saw, they were like, what result would you change? Well, Elgin would be the one that you would rather not have heavily involved, but didn't necessarily know everything, all the information back then. But the Bucks, it's a tough one, because they do have a lot of haters, but you're right. They did tend to keep them in a certain spot there. I think in the beginning but the junior heavyweight tag team titles bounce around like a Super Bowl anyway.
Right.
Like, no one holds them long. We were just talking about that. 7 defenses is the record. Not a lot of, that's the all-time record for those belts. And it was not recent. It was a while ago. That just happens anyway, but the pattern they were establishing on this is title change. I think, what was it, like the first 6 title match? There were an insane number of title matches on this show, because they had the Ring of Honor title and all that. Mm-hmm. But everything changed. Everything switched until we got to the Intercontinental title, where Naito held on to it over Tanahashi, and then the world title. So I think Jeremy's probably onto it there, that you take the title off the Bucks, you just think, well, they're gonna give them something later, right? And then so again, planting that seed of doubt, and then seeing title change after title change, like, oh, this could be just the theme of the night. And also, I think they were building drama.
Okay, so let's we'll quickly go over the winners of the show, and then we'll talk about the star ratings on a couple of matches. I wanted to see what you guys thought Dave would rate them. So obviously we mentioned Michael Elgin wins the New Japan Rumble. Tiger Mask W, who is Kota Ibushi, beats Tiger the Dark, who is ACH. Rocky Romero and Trent Beretta beat the Young Bucks to win the junior tag titles in less than 13 minutes. Then they did the Trios Gauntlet. Yujiro, Bad Luck Fale, and Chase Owens beat Will Ospreay, Yoshihashi, and Jado in the first part of the gauntlet. Then Sonata and Evil and Bushi beat them in the second part of the gauntlet.
I think there was Adam Page in there, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. You know what?
Page, Yujiro, and Fale, and then it was a
Hontai
group.
So Dave wrote Chase Owens in the Adam Page scenario. That's funny. That is hilarious.
Because Hangman Page was not the name yet. They were pretty interchangeable at the time.
And then Sonata, Evil, and Bushi beat Kojima, Ricochet, and David Finlay, who were the champs, to win those titles. Cody as the American Nightmare, because if you remember, he could not use the name Rhodes, so they were trying to use different ways to to call him what he wanted to be called. But at this point, he was Cody the American Nightmare. He pins Juice Robinson in under 10 minutes.
Yeah, my favorite way they got around that was by calling them Cody and Brandy Rhodes.
Yes. Yes, that was a good one.
That was the best about that one. That was the best one. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Adam Cole beats Kyle O'Reilly to retain the ROH title, and the reason that Adam Cole won is because Kyle O'Reilly is going to NXT. The conversation was, if Kyle is staying, he is going to keep the title, and if he's losing, Adam Cole's going to win it. And he was a favorite because of his style, and New Japan really wanted to add him to the to do a lot more stuff in New Japan because his style fit, but then he was going to leave, so Adam Cole won, and we never got to see that version of Kyle O'Reilly in New Japan.
If you can find a match that took place, I believe it was at Korakuen Hall, between Kyle O'Reilly and Kushida, it's one of the very best junior heavyweight title matches of that run, where Kushida defended against Kyle. Fantastic match. He really did fit Strong Style nicely. Can't argue with the NXT run, AEW run. He's made a lot of money, but he was beautiful in New Japan when he got a chance to be part of that and really work that style in with a guy like Kushida, who has some MMA in there too.
Then the IWGP heavyweight tag titles, Toru Yano and Tomohiro Ishii win the IWGP tag titles over Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, and the New Japan Cup winners, who were Makabe and Honma. This is what Steven was talking about earlier. I will say that somehow Tama Tonga is still like the coolest guy in all of wrestling back in 2016 as well, 2017. He was so charismatic in this match. A little bit over the top, but hey,
a lot of language. They like to curse a lot.
A lot. Yeah, there was. And of course, this was all. Yano had Yano'd his way into the match. They weren't supposed to be. So Guerrillas of Destiny were the champions. Great Bash heel, Honma and Makabe had won World Tag League. And so Yano wanted to be in the match with Ishii, so he stole the tag team belts to piss off Guerrillas of Destiny. Then he stole the World Tag League trophies to piss off Great Bash Heel. Both of them were so angry they wanted Yano and Ishii in the match just so they could get their friggin' hands on the two guys, which is why Yano is literally hiding outside the ring for the first part of the match because he's scared to death. He's upset all these guys, but then they sneaky style their way into the tag belts, but big problems were on the horizon at New Year's Dash, which we'll get to in a little while.
And then Hiromu beats Kushida for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title. Goto pins Shibata, like we mentioned, to win the Never Openweight title. And Naito beats Tanahashi to retain the Intercontinental title. And then Okada beats Omega. Okay, so for the previous three matches before the main event, Hiromu and Kushida, Goto and Shibata, and Naito and Tanahashi. What do you think Dave Meltzer gave each of those matches from a star rating perspective?
4 3/4, all of them.
All of them?
Yeah.
No, just straight down the list. Boy,
probably close enough.
Oh boy, Shibata and Goto. I'll bet 4.5 on that one. I think Dave liked that one a lot. I bet he liked the stiffness. Tanahashi and Naito. Oh boy, was that 4 3/4? Did they almost get 5 on that one? I don't think. Was there another 5 on the show? I'll say 4 3/4 for Naito and Tana.
And then what about the juniors?
Oh, the juniors. Probably 4.5 again. I mean, the last 4 matches of the show were brilliant. All of them. They were just absolutely fantastic. Really launched Hiromu too in this one. So I'll go. I think they were probably the floor to me would be 4.5.
All 3 of them got 4.5 actually.
Oh, there you go. Look at
that. See, and when I was watching Naito and Tanahashi, in my mind, I was like, okay, 4 3/4 minimum. But this might be better than that. But it didn't have that last minute and a half, 2 minutes that maybe some of the better matches did. But still, I just thought it was so excellent. But yeah, 4.5 for all of them. All right, let's get to the end here. And I guess the last question before we kind of get to the aftermath is what is the one thing from this show that people are going to remember? And this is an easy answer because it's going to be Okada Omega, but is there a specific thing, like when you think of Wrestle Kingdom 11, like, is there a specific thing about that match or about the build or about the aftermath of that show that's going to come to your mind?
What comes to my mind for that is this version of New Japan. We got it for a few years. We don't quite have it now. Maybe someday. This is a show that you can parachute into. It helps if you understand the storylines. Absolutely helps. They talk about the depth of the Goto and Shibata thing. But if you just parachuted down into this, once a year, you could go to Wrestle Kingdom and see some of the best pro wrestling matches you're going to see all year long. And it didn't matter which promotion you liked. It didn't matter who you supported. You could just parachute sight unseen. I'm just going to watch some great wrestling. Like, it always delivered just a great, great wrestling show. And what we see now from them is there's still a lot of stories where the bodies have failed in a lot of these cases. A lot of these guys just aren't physically capable, but are still in the spots. So you're seeing main events, some of which are great. You get Goto and Zach. They can still go. They can absolutely still go. Did Zach and Umino deliver on that level? No, it sure didn't. You got Kenny and Gabe. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Zach and Ricochet, not quite at that level. But the idea that you could just parachute in, sight unseen, and watch 4 of the best matches of the year, bang, 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 that's something that this could really deliver. And it's just how I think of this era of New Japan, when it was just banger after banger after banger in terms of match quality from guys still in their physical primes.
And how your biggest show of the year should be, right?
Yeah. And you knew you were in for a marathon. Like, Wrestle Kingdom is not short. They're not worried about the coming in at 3.5 or 4 hours. You can get comfortable, but
we got comfortable.
It will absolutely deliver once you sit down there. And I would like to have that back at some point, guys, if you're listening.
There was a moment. I look at it more like a moment of like a visceral memory that I'm going to think about. And there were a lot of high spots in these matches. They went 46 minutes at like 5th gear, essentially. Like, these guys did not stop the entire time and were going with intensity. But for me, the one moment that I keep thinking about is before the match starts, and Kenny Omega and Okada are both in the ring. And Kenny has one of the Okada bucks in his hand. And he just kind of looks at it, and it's a perfect encapsulation of both of those guys. Kenny holding the dollar and just being like, this is what you are. You're nothing. Like, you ain't anything. And Okada doesn't even react. It's like, I know what I am, and I'm going to show you. But it's 2 different kinds of confidence before they lock up with each other. But they're both such alphas that you can feel the intensity in just the way that they lock their eyes, and Kenny smiling, almost taunting at him, just like, I'm going to take you down. I believe in myself. And that big fight feel before they ever lock up, that's the moment that you're just like, oh, it's finally here. That moment is happening. And for whatever reason, that is the image that is just sitting with me, is him with that dollar just smiling at Okada going, really?
Okay. And there's a little bit of, does Kenny really believe he is the guy, or is he trying to antagonize, or is he trying to get Okada off of his game? Like, what is he trying to do? And then when he does have the match that he does, then the next 3 matches, you're watching them through the lens of, like, there's just the 2 best wrestlers in the world versus, is Kenny good enough, like in the first match? So that's the kind of the thing but because I want to give Jeremy a chance. What'd you think about the Terminator video before the match, and then they're coming down the aisle with the Terminator mask?
It's iconic, isn't it? You know, like, the entire legend of Kenny Omega is birthed off of people seeing him come down with that Terminator like video and logo. I don't love it. Terminator's not my favorite thing, but this whole generational thing of AEW wrestlers and all these people cosplaying out their entrances and being Black Panther or Wolverine or Iron Man or whatever it is, it started with Kenny Omega and this Terminator entrance, and it does.
Oh, I thought it started with Big Show dressing up as Hulk Hogan. No.
Well, and the other thing I want to mention too is Prince Devitt had some entrances with some pretty elaborate. He did the Hannibal Lecter thing and some of those, and then later on he did the body paint.
Yeah,
right.
He would really jazz it up for big matches too at times. So
was it really like? Did he incorporate the VTR and the video with it?
I don't think some of the promotions he was working for had that capacity.
Right.
Yeah. I was a little worried, by the way, because I hadn't seen that thing in quite a while, and I was like, are we about to see Kenny Omega's naked backside? I couldn't remember. And they didn't show it, by the way. But I was like, because that's something that Kenny would probably like totally be down for. Like, this is how much I'm going to embrace this thing here. It's like, I am truly naked, guys.
And there was a moment in there too when it switches to Japanese. You know, like it has a little thing where he translates what the person's saying to him in Japanese, and it's showing the Terminator stuff. When the crowd kind of laughs, you know, there's like the crowd kind of chuckles, and at first you're just like, "Oh, I don't know if that's the reaction you're going for here." But they were once it took off, they were there for it. Like once Kenny actually appeared, they were into things. But
it definitely had a little bit of low budget vibe to it. Now that you see stuff nowadays, like you saw the mask and it's like, oh, that's just some spray painted silver paint. Yeah. Like that's cool. And then you see like the amount of money that all these talents are pouring into these 3 minutes of patronage that they're doing at the beginning. Amazing.
Is this true? Shota was one of the hoods in that video?
I was trying to see if I could identify anybody. I didn't recognize anybody.
That's almost as good as if you go all the way back to John Cena's Chicago Gangster entrance. Remember at the United Center when CM Punk gets out with the Tommy gun and he's looking around like a little shifty-eyed, you know, like a little Chicago gangster and all that. Oh, our boy's all grown up.
I thought you were going to say you can go all the way back to Ready to Rumble, and John Cena is supposed to be one of the weightlifters in one of the weightlifting scenes with Bill Goldberg. I never saw him, but I always heard that too.
It's like watching a Hard Day's Night and trying to find Phil Collins in the crowd.
Brad mentioned this, but Rey Mysterio did a lot of like comic book cosplays when he was in WWE the first time around. But there was a limit to what they would allow you to do or even like identify. Then there came a point where these promotions would let you just lean all into it and just let you go wild on it. Mm-hmm. And this is where I kind of felt like that became that door started opening a little bit more.
Yeah. And it's Kenny's thing. It's Kenny's thing in New Japan. There really aren't a lot of those really elaborate videos anymore since he's been gone. Like they do some of it, but not like he
tried. And they're like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah,
they tried his new music after Wrestle Dynasty for like 2 shows, and they pulled the plug on that.
Yeah, didn't quite pan. Yeah, and this this was I forgot about this. One of the first instances of Go Ace as Tanahashi's theme music after moving away from his previous one, which is pretty iconic. His previous music was pretty iconic, and I remember when this came out, they were like, they ditched that classic for this crap, and now like Go Ace like sticks in my head for days after I hear it now.
Yeah, there was Dave wrote that he thought that the crowd just shit on the music, like that they hated it. on Wrestle Kingdom.
Like the Go Ace, like they were just like, what? Why do they want us to shout Go Ace? It was like when they had to get rid of Eye of the Tiger for Hulk Hogan, and they went with that god awful Hulk before they hit on Real American, and there was a
song
piano.
Was literally called Hulk Theme.
Yeah,
it was weak. On the wrestling album. It
was the theme to Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling cartoon show as well. Right. But it stunk on ice though, because it just
voiced by who is Hogan voiced by?
Brad Garrett.
There you go.
Brad Garrett was the voice of Hulk Hogan on that. Boy, we're nerds. Anyway, yes, there's things like there are things I need to know in my life that can't get in because I know Brad Garrett voiced Hulk Hogan, but. So that music was actually fairly controversial, if you could believe. The Go Ace at one point was a controversial move.
All right, the thing that I'll always remember is just the rating that Dave gave being a dominant part of the conversation of the match. And I think that rating probably drove a lot of people to go and find the match who wouldn't have watched it otherwise. Because I was one of them. I was like, really? It was that good? And I'd watched at least one or two previous Wrestle Kingdoms with Dave at his house in a row. And I don't even remember why I didn't watch this one at his house. It may have had something to do with, having, young kids and such. But yeah. And so that drove me to watch it. And I just remember it being a big part of the discourse. Okay. So the aftermath of this show, Kenny Omega is kind of hinting around Twitter that not quite sure if he's going to be with New Japan. Some of it is a little bit of like shooty kind of comments. He's like, I lost the match. I got to go back to the drawing board. I don't know what I want to do. I'm not going to go back to being pushed in the middle. I want to be the top guy, like that kind of stuff. John Cena, aka Confucius, randomly posts a photo of Kenny Omega on his Instagram. And it just gets the internet to go crazy and insane, thinking that Kenny Omega may show up at the Royal Rumble, just like AJ Styles did the year prior.
Yeah.
I think it was probably some of it was leverage for Omega. Like his contract was going to be up. He probably got some promises that he needed in order to sign back with New Japan, that he was going to be in the mix and he was going to be a big deal and he would eventually get a run, and all of those things happened. But very smart, I think, on his end. New Japan World gained 10,000 subscribers from that show, with more than half of those people coming from the U.S. So big gainer there for New Japan. And I think what Steven was alluding to earlier is on New Japan Dash, the main storyline coming out of New Japan Dash was Suzuki-gun reuniting and attacking Kenny Omega, and that was going to be his first title defense post Wrestle
Okada. Attacked Okada and Chaos. Kenny wasn't there, and all of a sudden there's this big shock where you saw Desperado and Taichi, Kanemaru, and was it Davey Boy Smith and Lance Archer all ran in and beat the living hell out of Chaos. Okada was starting to make a little bit of a comeback when the man himself, Minoru Suzuki, came out, shock and awe in Korakuen Hall, because they had been banished to Noah for years as part of the working agreement with New Japan to go in as a top heel group. And they made a shock arrival back into it. And that was Okada's first big title match, was against Minoru Suzuki. It was a hell of a match too at New Beginning, but that was the return. And then Yano and Ishii had to deal with Archer and Smith, and Desperado was back in the junior division. So was Taichi a junior. And then they would add this extra guy to go after Katsuyori Shibata and his Rev Pro title, which Shibata also held at the time. That was how Zack Sabre Jr. started appearing for New Japan.
Fascinating stuff. I will share my one meeting Minoru Suzuki story, which I've said before in different places, but I'll say it here. So 2 years later, WrestleMania 35 weekend, WrestleMania was in New York. We were with John LaRocca's good friend, Dave Dutra, and also with JR Kratos, who's now in NWA. He did a little bit of stuff for New Japan, but never really took off there on some of these US shows. And so there's a show that is held in New Jersey. There was like one place in New Jersey that was the place where all of these shows happen. There's like show after show after show after show. It's like really got disgusting at some point. But so we're with JR Kratos. This may have even been the Bloodsport show. Now that I remember, I was trying to remember like why we were there. But anyways, we're with JR and we're in the back, so we kind of walk with him in the back. And Suzuki walks over, looks at all of us, shakes all of our hands like we are worthy of just, being respectful to. And we say hi and, nice to meet you and everything. And he just starts smoking butts right in front of everybody before his match. So that was this. Okay, this is the coolest old man in the history of old men.
And he'll outlive us all.
The murder grandpa. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. His shop in Harajuku. He has a little the pile driver store. It's just a little store. It's on like the basement level in Harajuku, and he's there when he's not traveling for wrestling or something, and he runs it. I think it's his son that runs it, or else they managed to find somebody else with cauliflower ears who looks like a 25-year younger version of him than. But that's who sold me my shirts. Unfortunately, he wasn't there that day. But right across from that is another wrestling store that's frequented by Yuji Nagata. I don't know if he owns it or something like that. So the biggest rivalry in wrestling, and I'm pretty sure these guys just kind of hang out all the time. So it's a little like cool. It's like Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. They're just over there grousing at each other from across the mall hallway.
You even went further back than Silver Spoons to end the show. I like that.
I'm the youngest guy here, aren't I? That's amazing.
Yeah, oh yeah. And probably in the chat too. I'm probably the oldest.
No, I think there are some kids in the chat.
All righty. I want to say thanks to you both for doing this. I had a blast, and I like this show, doing this show, because it gives me the opportunity to research stuff that I'd forgotten, or maybe that I didn't even think about in real time as being super important. But this was definitely super important. And, this just sets the tone for this upcoming Saturday, which is Omega and Okada 5. And let's end with this. What is your expectation for this match? As far as, obviously from an athletic standpoint, you can't replicate what they did 7, 8, and 9 years ago. But do you still think that they have that chemistry? Do they have everything it takes from a pro wrestling feud, or guys who just know how to work with each other, to where we're just going to see greatness? Or are you kind of worried about this match? Go first, Steven.
I'm a little bit worried about it. My worry is not that you're right about the athleticism. It's not going to look like those matches from back then. I do believe that Kenny and potentially Kazuchika are intelligent enough to know what not to do. And I think their timing is still incredible. So I think that what they will do will still be timed perfectly and exciting. If we get the motivated Okada, we haven't seen that in a very, very long time. And Okada just wants to go out and have a really good match. But I think with Kenny, there's too much there. If this match comes out and is just kind of okay, that's a really ugly situation for both of them. And I don't think they're going to want that to happen. So I think we're going to get as much of the motivated Okada as we're going to get from this AEW contract, where he's kind of just sat down on it and taken Tony's money for a few years. So is it going to be what it was? I doubt it. But I do think it'll be a very, very good version of what Okada can do now. And I don't think either one of them will want to stain what's gone before. I think they're going to try harder than we usually see Okada try. And that's a good sign anyway. Will it be what it was? No, but it'll probably be better than what we're used to from Kazuchika.
This actually gave me an opportunity to talk about something that I've been chewing on for the last couple of days, and that's the Ibushi Okada match that we saw the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I saw a motivated Okada who was more or less exercising a ghost, as well as wow, no, we're really going at it there. I apologize for that background. Exercising the ghost of their G1 Climax 31 match, where it was essentially these two guys had a disaster of a match 4 years ago, and they went out there and they were able to put that behind them and forge a new story of all those things. And I think we're going to get something really similar to what Omega and Okada will have, where they're going to reforge and, redefine everything that they've done in the past. And Kenny's had the diverticulitis. Okada's not the same guy that he is. I think it would be foolish to assume that they're going to have another 6-star match. But I think that those two pro wrestlers are so good, and if they're ready to leave it on the table, and I think this is a match that Okada's ready to leave it on the table, hitting a 5-star match between these two is probably not going to be all that difficult.
If Tony Khan signed Kazuchika Okada for one reason, it was this match, right? It was to do this match on U.S. soil in front of the AEW crowd. Mm-hmm. Kenny Omega got over the hump in many ways this year, and I think he has timed out his appearances very well. I was not into the over the top bleeding from the mouth, going out on a stretcher and coming. I don't really like that in my wrestling anyways, especially when it's, we talked about Kenny Omega being a little over the top with stuff that was very over the top. But this is like all of my hopes and dreams about what New Japan USA was going to be was kind of what this match is. Now, I wish it would have happened, 5 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever. And it was supposed to happen, right? It was supposed to happen at that G1 show. I'm sorry, the New Japan ROH show, WrestleMania weekend for WrestleMania 35. That was the scheduled main event before the AEW thing happened. So this is like the moment for them. I think this is the reason why Okada's here. This is the reason why Kenny is so working so hard to get back to whatever his ceiling is at this point in his career. And I agree with Brad. Brad said Okada and Omega are wrestling geniuses to lay out another classic. That is the part of it, which is they have an idea of what story they did not tell yet, that they probably had a series of things that they wanted to do thinking they were going to wrestle a few more times. That didn't happen. And now they get to, if this is the last time they wrestle, they get to put all of those things together in this one match. I'm just crossing my fingers that the appetite isn't too big and they do something that, causes them pain. And I hope that they get out of this match pretty healthy. Mm-hmm. Because you want these guys to have long careers, but this is the moment. Like, this is where you let everything out, because I think this is what we all signed up for when we thought about what AEW and what New Japan and what Forbidden Door and what all of those things could be. This is like the apex of the mountain for that. So I'm hopeful that they get to do the match that they've always wanted to do. And I'm going to like it. There's very little chance that I don't like what they do, just because I love both of those guys as pro wrestlers.
It's kind of bonkers to me how much money those guys are probably being paid. And you can think about the fact that Tony Khan is probably paying, you could argue this is a $5 million match, between how much he's paying both guys, that this is in very ways a big money match.
In some way, I wish this was the main event of All In, and it's not going to be, because you have Adam Page and Jon Moxley. And if you don't have that match as the main event, as your world title, this entire storyline that they've been doing,
it's rocking a hard place.
Yeah, but I do kind of wish this was the main event, just because it would sort of encapsulate what AEW and New Japan, to me, what the perfection of that collaboration is, and that's this match to me.
Can you make that magic in 30 minutes?
I think that they should change the rules to have no time limit on this match. Maybe they should say that in their face off on Dynamite. Like,
is it a 30-minute time limit officially? Is it?
No, I just figure that the match is probably going to go around 30 minutes.
Okay, so if I put the over under on 35,
I want the over, but I'll take the under.
Interesting.
Garrett, what do you think?
I think I'll take a slight. I'll take a slight under on it.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks again, guys. So for Steven and Jeremy, who will be back Thursday at 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern for Speaking of Strong Style. I'm Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.